Tom, now that you've chosen the lucky person to be your designated individual, the step two here that we see in this regulation, and guys, we're going to provide this in the link below. You can read all about this ad nauseum. If you have a hard time falling asleep, maybe this is a good place for you to start. But now we're moving into something that in some organizations is really, really hard to do. And takes a long, long time. And since we only have just over 100 days, are you worried about if I haven't started today and I'm a six dealership, center, am I going to be able to get this done? What is a risk assessment? How do I document it? What does it look like? And why should I do it?
Yeah, so risk assessment's an interesting thing. There's a lot of subjective ways to approach risk assessment and so forth, but at its core, what it is, okay, I have this thing of value. What bad thing could happen to it? And if that were to happen, what would be the impact? And what is the likelihood that bad thing happens? You combine those two and you say, okay, here's my risk score. Then you say, okay, what am I going to do, or what can I do to lessen the impact or lessen the likelihood? And this is what we call our residual risk score. And we just basically lay those controls on until we get it to an acceptable level. What's an acceptable level? Again, this is where we get a little subjective. For smaller businesses, I recommend they keep it simple. They say there's low risk, there's medium risk, there's high risk, there's critical risk. And the business should document that we will accept medium and low risks if you want to. I mean, but any high risk or critical risk, we are going to put more controls in place to make sure that we get that down to a medium, so it's acceptable to us.
Got it. So, Tom, let me ask one more question at this stop here, stop two, performing and documenting a risk assessment. I'm a principal of a 3 dealership entity. I don't even have the answers that I'm presuming you're going to ask me. How do I even get this stuff together? Meaning, if you come in and I come in and we start talking in Greek about cyber controls and all these kinds of things, what are some tips that you could give? Is there like a questionnaire that I should start filling out, or should I write down things that I know about are bad, or I'm not using different controls, or whatever? I mean, obviously those things would be a good place to start, but how do you have the proprietor or the owner of this dealership, so to speak, even assemble this information? Because that's one thing that I hear a lot is, man, I got a list of like 29 things that I need to return. I don't even know where to start with this, and it's overwhelming.
Right. So generally, you're going to, at least the first couple times, you're going to need a coach. So you're going to need someone to come in and say, okay, the first thing we need to know is, where is this non-public personal information? Do you have a system that it's stored in? Do people keep it in spreadsheets on their workstations? Is it written and in a folder? Where is it? Then we start breaking down what's the bad thing that could happen to it there. And then we can say, okay, this bad thing could happen. What controls can we put on? And that's where it requires someone with some level of technical knowledge to say, okay, so the data's in the system's accessible from the internet. How do we protect it? Well, we can encrypt it. Let's try that. Well, that may not lessen the likelihood that someone gets to it, but the impact's going to be less because they're not going to be able to decrypt it, and it's valueless to them.
Okay, good. And then one more question just around this in particular. If I was to expect, it's kind of like, when we had our first baby, what to expect when you're expecting. Everybody, read the book at some point. How long, let's say, and again, pure insights to the community here in which we serve, maybe I've received a quote or a proposal for X amount of dollars, but like, what's a good rule of thumb? And maybe you can't give it, but how long should this take if I'm a 100-person car dealership and, I have some basic assets, but I use CDK and ADP and all these different providers? Like, what can I expect here in scope? Is this a 1 month thing, a 2-day thing? How long do these take?
So usually they take about 4 to 6 weeks from the time that you sign the paper and say, okay, we're going to do this with you. There's usually a week that to kick it off. We're going to need some information from you. You're going to have to provide it. Then we're going to do interviews with your people. We may have to do some testing if you haven't done it, things like that. So generally, from the time we start till the time you have a risk assessment slash report in your hand is going to be 4 to 6 weeks. However, caveat is that it is dependent on you and your people interacting with us. We can't make you talk to us. So
got it. Okay. So you've got to be participatory during the thing. I've got to give you as the auditor the key information, the access you need, the scope of where our data is, all that kind of stuff. I mean, you can't just come in blind and help this. So I should expect then, as a principal of a dealership, to have to invest some time if I'm, quote, the designated individual or someone on my team. This is not a magic wand that we can wave and produce a documented risk assessment, correct?
Correct. And also you have to remember that it's not just the IT person. So, you know, in some cases they say, okay, we're going to have the IT person head this up. It makes sense because the majority of it is IT. However, we do venture into business areas such as HR and how you deal with terminations and adding employees and giving access. So, you know, in a small dealership, you probably have an office manager that may also have to be accessible to us, something like that.
Got it. Great. Well, guys, there's some really good tips on what a risk assessment is, why you should do it, how long they take, and what you'll need to be involved with throughout that process.